Feedback. This is we've talked about the strange happenings around Pokemon in the recent days. Dead bodies being found, a gay Pokemon turning up at the Westboro Baptist Church in the United States, Pokemon-related injuries. And here's an email from a listener. Poke spying. I'm telling you now, it's an evil device designed to allow wholesale surveillance of the population by the population. What rights do you have to stop someone playing a game from pointing their tracking and recording device at you? Who gets the consistent metadata produced? And who owns the screenshots and recordings that are made? Lots of love, Mason.
He's thought about this a lot. Perhaps a bit too much. Although the privacy settings issue, I've seen some reporting on it which says it's a bit of a problem. My favourite one so far is someone in a war zone in Iraq had a picture of the gun pointed out there, and then had their phone taking a picture of the Pokemon thing, which was quite something. It's my kids are and my youngest daughter in particular is way into Pokemon, so there's a frenzy going on out there right now. How long it lasts, of course, who knows? But it just reinforces again, if you've got a hit that people can download onto their phones, either Androids or iPhones, suddenly it can be a global phenomenon within hours. Yeah. And you better make sure you got your servers working, because otherwise you're going to be swamped.
So how are they monetising it, though? Because in the past it was cards, wasn't it? Because that's the whole thing. They're reinventing their childhood favourite game, wasn't it? Pokemon cards that the kids collected?
Yeah, that was certainly one stage in the development. I believe that it offers in-app purchases. You can buy upgrades, and I don't have the app myself, so I have no idea. But I mean, you do the budget for some of these things, some of the other mobile games. Like I don't know, every pop-up ad I seem to get at the moment is Mobile Strike with Arnold Schwarzenegger fronting the ad. I mean. How big a business? I mean, financially, how big a business are these online games?
It's huge, because you've
got Kim Kardashian and her Kimojis. They're really expensive.
Kimojis, you have to buy them?
She has a whole range of
Tell
Kimojis.
me you bought some Kimojis.
No, not me, but I know perfectly otherwise normally sane women who have, and it astonishes me.
Is this something you're going to do on the hens night? Buy Kimojis together.
Well, the hens are all of a certain age, between 65 and 70. I'm already playing Pass the Cucumber, where you can't use your hands. So I think that might be one of the more exciting things to happen to them tonight. And I've got a blow-up fireman here in the studio with me. His mouth is very wide open. I don't know that is that a thing? I
think we'll move on. Before Lisa gets herself in trouble or just ruins the surprise for her mother. I just want to stay with the Pokemon just very briefly. It has become very divisive, though. I mean, a lot of these games have popped up, and like you say, you think of Angry Birds, for example, was one of the first maybe really mass successes. But they didn't seem to divide people the way this does. I mean, I've read a lot of very, very angry people on both sides of the debate over Pokemon Go. The supporters saying, you're all just grumpy old men if you don't like it, and the people against it saying, well, I hope you do walk into traffic. That might have been something I tweeted. Sorry about that. I mean, why do you think this particular game has fired people up so much?
It's just it's gone out there so fast, and there's a bunch of people wandering around, obviously. But I just think these days online, whenever we debate anything, it's always angry. This is the problem about online debates, I just want to yell at the internet, please just dial it down.
Yeah. Everyone's always enraged constantly, and nobody ever says, oh, my bad, or backs down. They just stop that topic and go on to another one and be mad about that instead.
Well, not everybody. Our online listeners have been very kind to us today. Lots of suggestions for Dunedin street names. Happy Feet Street, Albatross Close. Answer to your question, Lisa, don't worry about petrol. When recently caught in motorway traffic, I had to pee into a soft drink bottle. So, from a listener, I know there's merit to the smart motorway, but my experience, it's purely people either not knowing how to merge and not keeping a safe distance as the main issues. That's me saying that in the nicest way. Will from Petone. Thank you, Will. And are you aware Transit New Zealand are going to put cheese cutter wire fences down the centre and sides of all state highways, beginning on State Highway 3 south of Hamilton? Crazy idea and dangerous. Roading is always going to divide people, but not here on the panel. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you, Lisa Scott in Dunedin.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
And Bernard Hickey up here in Auckland with me today.
Cheers, Jeremy.
We are finished for the afternoon. The panel continues tomorrow. Who's going to be the host? Well, it's a guessing game at the moment. Good luck with that.
Kia ora everyone, ko John Campbell aho. Haere mai, welcome to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Tau te maira I hoa mai, he kōrero kei te haere, he kōpapa kei te karawhiua. Tonight, a man shot dead by police in Hamilton. They say he was armed. His family says he wasn't. Some pretty wild weather in parts of the south with some warnings for drivers about high winds, flooding and road closures. Affordable homes, it sounds good, and if demand's a measure, Hobsonville Point in West Auckland has been a roaring success. But how on earth do you get into it? David Cameron is waking for his last morning as British PM. The cat stays, but he's leaving Downing Street. We go live to our correspondent and we ask, who is Theresa May? John Minto says, vote for me Christchurch, and Helen Clark says, vote for me UN. All of that and more over the next 89 minutes. But first, Katrina Batten with RNZ News.
Kia ora, good evening. Armed police are still at the scene of a fatal shooting in Hamilton last night. 36-year-old Nick Marshall died after being shot by police during a drugs and weapons raid on a property in Frankton. His father and partner both have posted on Facebook that he was unarmed when shot. The police say Mr Marshall repeatedly refused to put down his weapon and was shot by more than one officer. They say a pump-action shotgun and a live cartridge were found where Mr Marshall was standing. A scene examination is expected to take several days, and in the meantime there are armed guards at the cordon. Some home buyers say they're finding it impossible to track down affordable houses in the Auckland developments that promise to offer them. Several projects in the city's special housing areas, such as Hobsonville Point, were supposed to reserve some homes for people on an average income. But buyers say they can't find out how to contact developers or whether there's a waiting list or ballot system. One, Michaela, says she contacted the Auckland Central MP, Nikki Kay, the Auckland Council and Housing New Zealand, and was told to contact the developer directly. She only managed to speak to 3 of the 13 she tried to contact, and they didn't know how to help. A spokesman for the First Buyers Club, which helps people into their first homes, says nobody is overseeing who is allocated an affordable home. A former Taranaki teacher jailed for 4.5 years on child pornography charges today likened his offending to stamp collecting. Judge Chris Sygrove said in his pre-sentence report Donald Matthew Capon admitted using the images for sexual gratification.
And advised that the primary motivation for the offending was the thrill of the acquisition, and likened your actions to collecting stamps or pens.
Judge Chris Sygrove, the 50-year-old, uploaded images and posted links to material held in a cloud storage website in Slovakia. Customs officers searched his home in February and on his computer discovered 382,000 images and 17,000 videos depicting children, some of them engaged in sexual acts. The new disclosure regime for foreign trusts is likely to be in place by early next year. The government has formally accepted all of the recommendations made by John Shewan, except the proposal to speed up the complete rollout of the anti-money laundering laws. The government commissioned review made about 20 recommendations to strengthen what it says are inadequate rules surrounding foreign trusts. The Revenue Minister, Michael Woodhouse, says the government intends to move quickly and implement all but one. He says a bill containing most of the substantive changes should be passed by March or April next year, with the new disclosure regime in place soon after that. Helen Clark says the United Nations is falling short when it comes to ensuring peace and security throughout the world, and this has to change. New Zealand's former Prime Minister and the head of the UN Development Programme has taken part in a televised debate with 10 other candidates vying for the UN's top position of Secretary-General. Political reporter Benedict Collins has more.
Helen Clark says while the United Nations faces many challenges, it's clearly not delivering on peace and security. She says the United Nations has to get better at resolving and preventing conflict, and the solution lies in creating societies that talk out their differences, not fight them out. The successful candidate will take over from the current Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon when he finishes at the end of the year. From Parliament, Benedict Collins.
Strong winds have knocked several vehicles off the road in the lower South Island today, including a bus carrying 30 tourists. Met Service has recorded wind gusts of 122 kilometres an hour in Fiordland and in Porters Pass in Canterbury, and 94 kilometres an hour in Fairlie. Near Fairlie, a gust pushed a bus carrying 30 tourists off the road, and Andrew Norris from the Fire Service's Southern Communications Centre says there have been several other incidents in Canterbury.
We've been down in the Mount Somers area, as well as Methven, where we've had several motor vehicle accidents where either bikes or vehicles have been blown off the road. These have not resulted in serious injury to the best of our knowledge.
Andrew Norris from the Fire Service. Motorists on State Highway 1 between Darfield and Methven and Timaru and Rolleston have been warned to take care due to strong winds, which are also making their presence felt in the upper South and lower North Island now. In sport, denying Queensland a series clean sweep and farewelling skipper Paul Gallen in winning fashion are the two motivating factors for New South Wales ahead of tonight's third and final State of Origin match in Sydney. Queensland are chasing their fifth series whitewash. For Gallen, it will be his 24th and final State of Origin match, and coach Laurie Daly says a win would be a fitting send-off.
He goes out there and leaves nothing in the tank, and I think the boys appreciate that, and they know they know how much this game means to him personally, and for us, that'd be great if we can go out there and not only win for Gal, but win for the state, because that'll give everyone a great deal of optimism.
Laurie Daly. The Mind Games have already begun between New Zealand heavyweight boxer Joseph Parker and IBF champion Anthony Joshua. Parker is the mandatory challenger to Joshua's IBF title, with their fight expected to happen in November or early next year. But first, Parker faces the former Australian Rugby League player Solomon Haumonu in Christchurch next week. If Parker loses that fight, he loses his challenge against Joshua, and in the meantime, the 24-year-old is refusing to say the British boxer's name.
No, I just said to myself after his last fight, I won't mention his name until after my fight with Solomon. So I won't talk about him. He's always in the back of your head, but you got to focus on what's in front of you. And if you don't focus on what's in front of you, that's probably the one that'll get to you. So the full focus at the moment is on Solomon.
Joseph Parker, that's the news.
Tonight on Nights, the lay preacher John Thornley continues his exploration of spirituality in popular music. This evening, Aretha Franklin's reading of I Dreamed a Dream from the show Les Miserables. Just as relevant now as it was when she sang it for Bill Clinton. And this week's overseas correspondent Will Flockton is on the line from post-Brexit Brighton, one of the few cities outside of London to vote to stay in the EU, on Nights after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow, and warnings cover the South Island and Lower North Island. Northland to Waitomo, including Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Rain developing this evening, briefly heavy in the morning, followed by isolated showers. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, high cloud with brief rain overnight or in the morning. Taranaki to Wellington, also Wairarapa, rain with heavy falls and isolated thunderstorms late today, easing to showers tomorrow morning and clearing Wellington and Wairarapa. Severe northerly gales later today, easing early tomorrow. Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury, Otago and Southland. Heavy rain in the west and about Nelson today, with scattered falls further east. Northwest gales severe in Marlborough and Canterbury today. Mainly fine tomorrow, although further showers in the west and also Southland. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, heavy rain at times with squally thunderstorms and hail. Snow to 400 metres about Fiordland tomorrow morning. And the Chatham Islands, cloudy, rain with heavy falls developing tomorrow afternoon. It's 5:09.
Thanks, Katrina. Yes, that weather's foul. We're actually going to talk to people about the roads in the South Island. Some are closed, some are flooded, and some are just plain dangerous. State Highway 1, I think south of Christchurch, in fact between Rolleston and Timaru, really high winds there. If you're heading south or in fact north from Timaru, do be careful, particularly if you're in a high-sided vehicle or on a motorbike. But we'll cross down live to the traffic people to get more on that a bit later. We're going to begin with the fatal shooting of Hamilton man Nick Marshall by police. Police have said the 36-year-old was armed and refused to put the weapon down. His family strongly dispute that. What's not in dispute is that the shooting happened as armed police officers raided a property in the suburb of Frankton. Police say it was part of an ongoing investigation into the supply of methamphetamine and firearms. In a moment we'll speak to a witness who was in a neighbouring business as the police went in. But a short time ago I spoke with our Hamilton reporter Andrew McRae. He's at the scene along with a number of armed police.
That's right, John. When I came here last night, there were armed officers on the cordon, and they've been here throughout the day. And when we arrived a few minutes ago, there's at least, I think, 3 armed officers still here, stopping traffic going through and basically just protecting the scene. You will also see behind me a police armed incident caravan that was set up early this morning. And the police expect to be here at the scene doing a scene examination for probably at least another couple of days.
Andrew, what have police said about the raid? Why were they going into this premise?
They say, John, that it was a pre-planned search warrant executed to look for drugs, particularly methamphetamine, also firearms. They also say that there was a connection with gangs to this particular premise, so they brought in the armed defender squad here around about 6:30 last night, and as soon as they arrived, they went in, they yelled out who they were, the police. They say that the gentleman that died, he was there. He didn't give himself up. He went to reach for a double-barreled weapon, a firearm, and they say he continuously refused to put it down, and that's when they fired. They say they don't know exactly how many shots. There were certainly shots, and the Assistant Commissioner said this morning that he thought that more than one of the Armed Offender Squad officers may have shot the victim.
Andrew, some of this version of events is strongly disputed by the dead man's girlfriend and by his father. The dead man's girlfriend is absolutely emphatic that he was not brandishing or presenting a gun, that he wasn't even holding one. The dead man's father is saying that there were no warnings issued. How certain are police in their version of events? How singular are they being in their description?
Well, the Assistant Commissioner, Alan Borum, spoke this morning. He had been at the scene for an hour or so looking over and talking to the officers here. He is adamant as much as he can be, from what he was told, that they were given a number of warnings when the police arrived, and the person then picked up the gun and aimed. He said he did aim the double-barreled shotgun at the police, and that's when they fired. So they're adamant that that's what happened. But Alan Borum also said that an investigation is underway, as well as a independent police conduct authority investigation. And I guess when we get the results of those two, we'll know exactly what happened, but that'll be weeks, maybe months away.
Andrew McRae from the scene. One of the neighbouring businesses is DS Tyres and Mechanical Repairs. The DS stands for Dyer Singh, and Dyer looked up as the police arrived. A few minutes ago, he told me what happened at about 6:30 last night.
We were there in the shop, and all of a sudden we heard this. I saw the car coming, cop's car coming, and flashing the lights and everything, and it just parked in front of my garage, and there's 2 cops. They came out from there, and they started shouting, calling that man to come out or something, and just that call was, they're still calling, and then all of a sudden we just heard them shooting, bang, 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 almost 4 times, and a bit of hustle up. They were trying to, maybe he fall down, or there was some things falling down, and after that it went calm.
So Dyer, how long did all of this take? Was this over very quickly, was it?
It was a very quick instant. It was just about few minutes, and it just finished off.
So the cars came in, they were shouting out to the people inside, and then there were gunshots.
Yeah.
And did you see the man that was shot? Did you see him out on the road?
No, he wasn't on the road. He was in his garage.
And do you know anything about him? Do you know what the business was inside that garage?
I did ask him. I asked him what you're doing in there. He said, we're doing some transmission job and stuff. So, because they were doing transmission before, and they sold that business to somebody else, and then maybe I thought they started up another transmission thing at the back. So I'm not quite sure if really that was the case or what, but we didn't. We had, I don't know, but he seems to be a nice guy, though. When I first started off, there wasn't any power or something. He did ask me if I needed some power or something, and he gave me power to use, and we hardly talk though, but whenever he needs something, maybe small things, he'd come and ask me, and I would just give it to him. So,
Had you ever seen the police there before? Had the police ever been around before to talk to anyone in there?
No, never.
Seeing who owns a neighbouring business, we did put in a bid for police to join us on Checkpoint tonight, but they declined. If we hear any more about what occurred last night, obviously we will bring it to you. It's 16 minutes past 5. With Auckland property prices now sitting at an average of just under $1 million, the demand for what's defined as affordable property in our largest city is intense, of course. These are homes for people to buy, rungs up the ladder from the emergency housing we've been looking at. And one of the government responses is special housing areas. These are mixed housing areas being built by developers. They get access to land and they're able to build tiers of housing, including 10% that is described as affordable. The poster child for the government's response is at Hobsonville Point, an extraordinarily sought after development on a former Air Force base in West Auckland there. Affordable homes are snapped up and there is a long waiting list. In fact, the Hobsonville Point website describes demand as, and I quote, overwhelming. So to get an access home, this is one of the cheap ones, as the cheapest properties are called access, you have to go into a ballot. That's fair and transparent, although many eligible buyers still miss out. But Checkpoint has learnt that the balloting system isn't being used in all the special housing areas offering affordable housing. Would-be buyers have told us that even getting onto a waiting list or into a ballot or finding out what's going on is proving impossible. One such would-be buyer is Michaela. She read about the affordable housing, she was eligible for it, she had a deposit through KiwiSaver, got very excited, but then she just started hitting walls.
So I rang up the council, and the council, they weren't very helpful, and then they said to contact Housing New Zealand, and then I contacted Housing New Zealand, and they said to contact the council. And then I contacted my local MP's Nikki Kay, so I contacted her office and then tried to get in that way, and it took ages. I spent like about a month trying to find out, how to go about maybe getting onto the list or how about buying one, because I thought, that would be a good first option. And in the end, we found out that they said to contact the developers. So we had to contact the both Nikki's K office came back and said that, and so the council, they said that to be able to purchase one of the special housing, which would be affordable for our first home, would be to contact the developers directly, is where we got up to. So it took me about a month of trying to go between on the internet and bringing up people, like people weren't calling me back to actually get that information. And then once I got that far, I started to ring up to find the companies of who the developers were to find out how to actually get one of those houses or put my name down to be able to, be on the list to buy that house.
Right, Michaela, I want to cut in there because it makes absolute sense. But what's fascinating to me is that we constantly hear about the special housing. We constantly hear about the developments which have an affordable housing component, and it's cited as an example, as a success story. It's mixed housing, so some people pay full market value, and other people get access at much lower prices. What you've found is there is no list, there is no control, there is no kind of public and official way you can get into that affordable property. You just have to deal with the developers directly, and I guess everyone is doing that, right?
Well, yeah, I think so. Well, I tried to contact, the hard thing was I was trying to contact the developers, and I had written a list of all the developers in any areas which, actually I looked at every area because I don't mind where I live. I just want to be able to stay in Auckland. And I couldn't actually not many of them I could actually find contact phone numbers. Like, I went through all of them and I had to do a Google search on the name of the company, and sometimes they didn't even have a company page, and I looked at the company register and it would lead me somewhere else. And in the end, I think I only spoke to 3 people. Like, I'd leave messages and no one would call me back. One company was really good, and the lady was really helpful, and she said that, she put me down on their mailing list, and she said that all the information's on their website, and she said it was really open with what apartments were the special housing ones we put aside and the prices, and it was basically first in, first served. And then other people I rang, there was only 2 other people. One guy said, contact the council, and the other guy didn't seem to know what I was talking about and just said that I seemed to know more than he did, and then that was it. So I just didn't know where to go from there.
So after all your efforts, after speaking to the council, Housing New Zealand, the Auckland Central MP, Nikki Kay, and spending a whole lot of time talking to developers, are you any closer to getting one of these properties?
I gave up. It took so long and I got nowhere, I just gave up.
How many developers have you pursued, gone after, tried to talk to, tried to engage with in total?
Well, there were 13 companies that I tried to find information on, and I think 6 of those I couldn't actually find out a contact phone number, and then there were 3, I think, that I was able to talk to, and one of them were helpful. It was actually the developer company, and she was helpful, and then the 2 others, they weren't so helpful. And
so, Michaela, when we hear there are these new communities, apartments, some in the CBD, some out in Hobsonville, for example, being built with special affordable housing for people exactly like you. Do you believe that in terms of your experience of trying to get into this housing?
Well, I don't know who it is that's getting them, so it's not for me, I don't think, because I don't even know how.
What are you going to do now then? If you've given up on getting access to this affordable special housing, what are you going to do?
Well, reason why we stopped is we're going to move to Wellington. So we put everything on hold because we're going around in circles and it's unaffordable in Auckland. I'd love to stay, but I think we're going to look at moving to Wellington at the end of the year.
Michaela, who is giving up on the dream of an affordable house in Auckland and moving south. So we contacted the Auckland Council. It told us that aside from approving resource consents, it has nothing to do with people accessing special housing areas, and interested parties should look on the internet and contact the individual developers directly, which, as you heard, was what Michaela tried to do. So we looked on the internet and we found the First Home Buyers Club. It's not a developer, rather it's a company which specialises in helping first home buyers find and fund their first home, including affordable homes in special housing areas. Its spokesman, Dustin Lindale, told us nobody is overseeing who's allocated affordable homes by developers. The developers themselves are difficult, sometimes nigh on impossible to contact, and many of the housing developments are still years away from construction.
Most of them are still at the resource consent stage. That's pretty much where they're at. There's a small portion of them, mainly probably in the apartment range, that are apartment or townhouse range, that are in construction or have been completed.
And Hobsonville, which is where the minister goes and the media goes out, and there's been lots of photo opportunities. So that is an example of places that are actually up and happening, right?
Yeah, well, we get a lot of calls about where are these houses and at what stage are they at. And I guess we probably, I have a sort of a standard response based on what I know that Hobsonville is obviously the biggest area and they've got the access homes up there. So I would suggest those ones, and then things like West Edge, and then the Quarry, the ones, Three Kings. Some of those are some of the ones that are starting to come on, but still in varying stages, I guess.
So, Dustin, in real terms, if we look at affordability in Auckland being defined under this program at 550k or less, how many actual properties have been made available so far? Do you have any idea roughly?
I'm not an expert on that. I wouldn't know. I just know that there's obviously very, very few of them because we keep getting calls. We get a lot of calls about where are they and how do we get access to them. But they're not actually. Yeah, it's very hard to get an idea of how many are actually available.
Dustin, who are you dealing with? Because you're obviously trying to help people get into these properties. You're obviously talking to them about what they have to do, what's available, how they're going to pay it, finance and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
When people come to you, do they have high expectations that there are going to be properties available? And are those expectations often simply dashed?
I think a lot of first-time buyers are just really desperate at the moment. It's probably at the moment it's probably never been harder for a lot of them. So I guess there are people getting in, but it does feel quite a fruitless sort of struggle for some of them.
From your experience, how would you rate your chances of getting an affordable place in a special housing development?
At the moment, I'd like to think that things are getting better, and we're hopefully at the beginning of the pipeline for a lot of houses coming on board. But it feels at the moment like its chances are quite slim. But all I could say is be encouraging of what's coming on as far as the pipeline, hopefully.
When you say quite slim, are most of the people you're dealing with, are most of the people who are seeking out your help going away ultimately without an affordable home in these special housing developments?
Well, I mean, I guess I don't always know what their outcome ultimately is, but based on the amount of people that are contacting us and struggling to get even just to the first point of call as far as registering your interest, that's my basis for saying that it's difficult, incredibly difficult, is based on that really, that people are struggling even at the first hurdle to actually register their interest in any development, say the Browns Bay Road, because as far as I know, there's no intended start date on anything like that.
So let's use Three Kings as an example, because that's a biggie, right? That's in the quarry out beyond Mount Eden there.
Yeah.
How do you register your interest? How do you tell the Three King developers, yep, we are keen to be part of this?
I mean, at the moment they've just got their website up. It's only it's just a register your interest form, and then I think there might be a email contact on there. But I have actually emailed them a couple of times to see if we can help to provide more information to our members about where they're at and how best for them to go about registering their interest and the process beyond that. I haven't heard anything back as yet.
Dustin Lindale from the First Home Buyers Club. So we contacted the office of the Building and Housing Minister, Nick Smith. He was unavailable to be interviewed, and his office referred us back to the Auckland Council. The Auckland Council, as you've heard, referred us to the internet. We'd love to hear from you if you've tried to access an affordable house in a special housing area, or if you've managed to buy one, particularly if you're one of the lucky people in the latter group. 28 minutes past 5. Within the next 12 hours, the UK will have a new Prime Minister. David Cameron has just a few hours left in the role and will today attend his final Prime Minister's questions before heading to Buckingham Palace to hand his resignation to the Queen. The current Home Secretary, Theresa May, will then take over as the British leader. Our correspondent, Natalie Powell, is in London and joins us now. Natalie, thank you for joining us. Lovely to have you with us. David Cameron, how will he go out? Will he just quietly sail away, or does he have a few bangs planned?
You know, it's interesting. We're likely to see in Prime Minister's questions a fairly relaxed Prime Minister. It's going to be his 182nd and final PMQs as Prime Minister, and he really wanted this to be his last hurrah, given that he's out of the job a lot sooner than he had predicted and perhaps anyone else had predicted, obviously with Theresa May now being uncontested and therefore being able to take up that top spot. So it was PMQs that he really wanted to do this week to finish off his role, essentially, his place in number 10, and we are likely to see a more light-hearted David Cameron. I'm sure that he would have liked to continue over the next 9 weeks on a sort of, as we've seen Barack Obama do in the States, sort of enjoying his time in the role, knowing that obviously it is coming to an end, but it's come a lot shorter than anyone had expected. So I imagine the atmosphere in PMQs would be a fairly jovial one.
Yes, the prediction business hasn't been going very well in British politics, has it? Because Cameron staked so much on the Remain vote. And boy, that has cost him, as we are discussing. Is that what he will be remembered for?
It's very likely that he will be the Prime Minister that led Britain out of the EU rather unintentionally. He obviously was campaigning, as you said, for the Remain camp, but just missed it by a few percent, really, and really misjudged that, although it was a campaign promise of his when he took up office back in 2015, of course. However, we have already seen a lot of tributes being paid to the Prime Minister over the last few days, particularly on Tuesday when he held his last cabinet meeting. And we are likely to see a lot of MPs reflect on a lot of positive things that he's done as well, or certainly seemed that way, including reforming the economy here in the UK. We know that there's record levels of employment, and he came in at a rather difficult time back in 2010, obviously just 2 years after the global financial crisis took hold, and has seemingly helped to restore Britain's economy. But the one thing that David Cameron says that he is very proud of course, is introducing the Same-Sex Marriage Act and legalising same-sex marriage during his time as Prime Minister.
Natalie, can we talk about Theresa May? Can we talk about the specifics of today and then the bigger picture about who she is and whether she's doing a rather wonderful job of putting some sheep's clothing on in the last few days? What is she going to do today? We're expecting to hear from her. She's already given a fairly rousing speech when it became apparent that she was unopposed in her quest for the job. What will she do today?
It was interesting. It was a fairly brief speech, but she said that she was very humbled to be now the Prime Minister in waiting. Today, she's essentially waiting for David Cameron to step down. He will tender his resignation into the Queen following Prime Minister's questions, and then she will be able to go to Buckingham Palace herself, and it's there that the Queen will ask her to form a new government. Of course, Theresa May has a lot of big decisions ahead over the next couple of days, and we're likely to see the formation of a new cabinet here on Thursday. So those front benches she'll be certainly trying to pick out at the moment, and there's a lot of speculation about who will go in which role. But what she will be doing is to try and form the strongest cabinet to go forward, particularly as she is going to be the Prime Minister tasked with beginning negotiations for a Brexit, which is something that she didn't campaign for, interestingly enough.
Natalie, just quickly, and this is a big question to answer quickly, so I apologise in advance. Who is she? What does she stand for? Because it seems to have been changing somewhat lately.
Yeah, absolutely right. Well, essentially, she is the daughter of a vicar. She's 59 years old. She's very famous for these kitten heels that she wears as well. But really what we're seeing is a slight change in personality. She's been seen as this rather cold woman. She's the second longest serving Home Secretary for the last 100 years, which is quite an achievement, actually. And she's been seen as a very cold, very hard-lined woman. She's now trying to change that. Obviously, becoming Prime Minister means that she's going to perhaps need to work on the personality side of things a little bit more, and we're starting to see that. Mr. May, her husband, has been coming out and campaigning with her, and we are really beginning to see the start of perhaps something a bit more prime ministerial with Mrs. May.
Thank you so much, Natalie Powell, live from London. We really appreciate what a fascinating time in British politics. We're juggling the order, Katrina Batten. So I know you're just sitting there thinking that we've got another story to go, but we haven't. So stand by, Katrina Batten.
Woohoo.
Sting, please. Coming up, the story that we were just about to bring you, but we've juggled this around. A busload of tourists had a lucky escape when their bus was blown off the road in the Mackenzie country. They are those high winds we're talking about. That's coming up. Helen Clark takes part in a televised debate in New York in a bid to, lead the UN. There's never been anything like this before. Veteran activist John Minto pitches to be the next mayor of Christchurch, and why Uber's New Zealand arm paid just over $9,000 in tax last year, despite revenue of more than $1 million. 9,000 on 1 million. We'd love to hear from you in any way you choose. You can text 2101 or email checkpoint at radionz.co.nz. Thank you for being with us. And Katrina Batten, thank you for presenting the 5:30 headlines.
Armed police are still at the scene of a fatal shooting in Hamilton. 36-year-old Nick Marshall was shot by police during a raid on a property in Frankton last night. His father and partner have both posted on Facebook that he was unarmed, but the police say a pump-action shotgun and a live cartridge were found where Mr. Marshall was standing. A scene examination is expected to take several days. Some Auckland home buyers say they haven't been able to track down affordable houses in the special housing areas that's promised to offer them. Buyers have told Checkpoint they can't find out how to get one, saying they either can't contact developers or can't find out whether a waiting list or ballot system exists. One, Michaela, said she contacted the Auckland Central MP, Nikki Kay, the Auckland Council and Housing New Zealand and was told to contact the developer directly. But those she spoke to didn't know how to help. A former Taranaki teacher jailed for 4.5 years on child pornography charges today has likened his offending to stamp collecting. In his pre-sentence report, Donald Matthew Capon said he used images for sexual gratification and compared his actions to stamp or pen collecting. Customs officers who searched his home in February found almost 400,000 images and 17,000 videos of children on his computer. Former Prime Minister Helen Clark says the United Nations is clearly not delivering peace and security, and this has to change. Ms Clark, who now heads the UN Development Programme, has taken part in a televised debate with 10 other candidates for the UN's top job of Secretary-General. President Obama has urged Americans to reject despair over racial tension, saying the nation is not as divided as it seems. He was speaking at a memorial service for 5 dead Dallas policemen who were shot dead by a black sniper. Protests over excessive police force against black Americans have meanwhile been held in cities across the United States. Those are the headlines. I'll be back at 6 with more news, sport and weather.
Thanks, Katrina. We've got more on Helen Clark pitching for the UN job coming up. I spoke to a correspondent before who described it as being like a pageant. All of that and more before 6:30. Turning to business news, though, with Jonathan Mitchell. Brexit jitters have rocked markets for the past few weeks. Jonathan, since the vote to leave the EU. But is there a sense that those concerns are starting to fade?
Well, it appears the risk is, John, investors are going for away from safe haven assets, things like gold and the Japanese yen. We've had some strong finishes on global share markets. Wall Street had a record close overnight. The NZX has been hitting records this week, and other share markets around the world, including Asia, are quite strong. I spoke with a senior economist at the wealth management firm GMI, John Campbell, who did tell me that there are some strong influences for markets at the moment.
Central banks have said that they will maintain the low interest rates and easy monetary policies that they've had for some time. The US Federal Reserve isn't expected to raise rates significantly this year. And the other reason is the US economy is showing signs that it remains quite strong, and we saw that with a very strong US jobs number last week. But you've seen other parts of the economy, like the manufacturing sector and consumer spending, also doing quite well. So I think investors are seeing Brexit now as more of a regional event, something that will affect the UK and potentially Europe a little bit. But at this stage, they're seeing the US as largely immune from that.
So some interesting comments there from John Campbell at GMI. Certainly the US helping markets at the moment.
Yeah, so are people saying that the Brexit trepidation jitters are over?
Possibly not. There's still a long way to go in the decision-making about Brexit, 2 years at least. There's still a lot of uncertainty about what it means for Britain itself and Europe. For now, at least, though, things like the US, the jobs data and other data we're getting out is helping market sentiment at the moment. But no, I think the Brexit jitters will continue, but at the moment the US is just helping.
And Theresa May's got to name her cabinet, right, which is going to be have a big influence on how Britain sees where it's going next. What happened in the markets today?
We're still at record territory, John. We did ease back 15 points and at 7064. The dollar has eased back a bit too, trading at 72.5 US cents and 95.4 Australian. As you mentioned, our markets will be watching out for a couple of things in the next 24, 48 hours. Theresa May coming in as the new British Prime Minister. And then later we've got the Bank of England coming out with a rate decision. Expect to see a rate cut, which would be the first one in about since 2009.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. Jonathan Mitchell live from Wellington. Let's head south where the weather is wild in parts. A busload of tourists had a lucky escape this morning when their bus was blown off the road in the Mackenzie country. Very high winds. The northerly front is blasting its way up the country, followed by heavy rain and snow. Rachel Graham has more.
The South Island was buffeted by gale force winds this morning, with the Met Service recording gusts of 122 kilometres an hour in Fiordland and in Porters Pass in Canterbury, and 94 kilometres an hour in Fairlie. It was near Fairlie that the bus carrying 30 tourists was blown off the road by a severe wind gust. Senior Constable Brent Swanson says it pushed the driver across the lane and onto the grass edge, just metres short of a steep bank.
He's managed to control the bus and brought it to a halt just before a fence and a steep bank. Yes, he managed to keep the bus upright through some good luck. And like I said, another 2 or 3 metres to the right, and he'd have been down a very steep bank and the bus would have rolled a number of times.
None of the passengers were injured. However, the driver had to be treated for mild hypothermia and shock. The winds have made a busy day for firefighters across Canterbury. The shift manager for the Southern Communications Centre, Andrew Norris, says unusually for July, crews have been fighting several fires caused by winds whipping up ashes from old burn-offs.
It's certainly the safest time to do it, especially after the long dry summer we've had. It's just unusual that we've got very strong northwest winds that are fanning the fires up again. And the irony of it is, up in Mount Somers area, we've got a fire burning over 6 hectares, but they've also got the added complication of soft, boggy land because of the recent rain.
Andrew Norris says the strong gusts have also made driving hazardous.
We've been down in the Mount Somers area, as well as Methven, where we've had several motor vehicle accidents where either bikes or vehicles have been blown off the road. These have not resulted in serious injury to the best of our knowledge.
The winds have now eased in the lower South Island, but have been replaced with heavy rain. High winds are headed towards Marlborough and Wellington, and meteorologist Tom Adams warns the gusts could get up to 140 kilometres an hour.
So the winds in Wellington are already reaching 93 kilometres per hour up at Mount Kaukau, and in Kelburn itself, we're getting the same values there as well. So it's getting windy, and it's going to get more windy tonight.
The good news for skiers is that snow is falling on ski fields in Cardrona, and more is expected around the southern lakes over the next few days. For Checkpoint, call Rachel Graham, TNA.
We will look at driving conditions in the South Island after the 6 o'clock news. Uber's New Zealand arm paid just over $9,000 in tax last year, despite revenue of more than $1 million. Accounts filed with the company's office show that revenue came from its parent company in the Netherlands for marketing and support services, but the total amount earned from fares in New Zealand is unknown, due to a complicated structure called double Dutch accounting. It's commonly used by multinationals to minimise the amount of tax they pay by moving money from high to low tax jurisdictions. We've looked at that a bit with some other companies. Auckland-based tax consultant Terry Boucher says Uber appears to have fine-tuned the use of this scheme. He explains this to our reporter Anusha Bradley.
The double Dutch system is an extremely elaborate layer of tax planning in which income is effectively booked in the Netherlands through one company and then shifted through another Dutch company to a tax haven company, in this case in Bermuda. How it works is this. You take a ride with an Uber driver and you use a credit card and pay the driver. That fare is actually paid through a Dutch company. The Dutch company then remits 80% back to the driver and keeps 20% of it. It then pays a royalty, this is Uber BV in the Netherlands, then pays a royalty through to Uber International, which is another Dutch company, but with an HQ listed in the Netherlands. And ultimately that company then pays on a small royalty to its HQ in Uber Technologies Inc. in San Francisco. Now, what the Uber BV does in the Netherlands, it then pays a marketing fee to Uber New Zealand. And so that's the income then comes in. That's how Uber New Zealand derives its income.
So that's the revenue that's been through the wash, so to speak. We don't know
Yes.
what the raw revenue is that's collected on the ground here in New Zealand, do we?
No, we don't. The Uber uses its contractors method. Each Uber driver in New Zealand is responsible for paying their own income tax and GST if they're over the GST threshold of $60,000.
Okay, when first of all, you said this is a form of tax planning. Do you mean tax avoidance?
Well, it does work in the end. If that's in essence what it's doing, is it's shifting its tax around as efficiently as possible.
It's not illegal, is it? It's commonly used by many multinationals.
It is. The technology giants, the tech giants in the Silicon Valley, Google, Facebook, and now Uber, they all use this strategy. Uber, it appears, has taken it, has fine-tuned it, because the other companies had an Irish subsidiary involved in there, but Uber seems to have found a way of not requiring that. So it is all within the law, the tax laws around the jurisdictions, but all tax jurisdictions everywhere are starting to get very antsy about it.
That's tax consultant Terry Boucher talking to Anusha Bradley. An Uber spokesperson says the company complies with all tax obligations in New Zealand. We approached Uber to discuss this in an interview and they declined. Helen Clark has spelled out why she believes she should be the next Secretary General of the United Nations in a very public sort of job interview. 10 of the candidates vying for the top position at the UN took part in a televised debate in New York today that was broadcast throughout the world. Political reporter Benedict Collins has more.
New Zealand's former Prime Minister and head of the United Nations Development Programme, Helen Clark, said in the debate that there are many challenges facing the UN across development, environment, humanitarian needs and human rights. But she says it's peace and security where the UN is coming up short.
We have to get better at preventing conflict and resolving conflict. I believe the long-term answers lie in building the peaceful and inclusive societies which will talk their differences out and not fight them out. But in the short term, we have to get a lot better at anticipating those warning signs of what could spill over into serious human rights abuses and conflict.
The candidates were asked about the problems with the Security Council, whose permanent 5 members wield a veto, and the power imbalance between nations that this creates. Helen Clark was asked what could be done to make the Security Council more just and egalitarian.
We have a council which reflects 1945, the end of World War II settlement. 10 years ago, the member states had a good go at trying to reform it. It didn't get to conclusions. The debate is raging again. If there's anything I can do as Secretary General to facilitate that debate, have the organisation offer technical options, legal advice, I will do that. Secondly, on the decision making, I would like to think I could contribute to building a better culture of trust between key parties on the Council.
Another leading candidate, Costa Rica's Cristiana Figueres, was asked about a lack of Security Council progress in dealing with the conflict in Syria and what she would do about it.
Well, I do think that it is a remarkable example of deadlock in the Security Council, and if there's any reform that is very urgent, in fact even more urgent than restructuring the Security Council, it's reforming the way that the 5 members work with each other so that they can get out of deadlock, because that is their responsibility.
Bulgaria's Irina Bokova was asked about the long-running dispute between Palestine and Israel and the lack of any resolutions coming from the Security Council to address it.
I think the first of the responsibilities of a future Secretary General will be to start rebuilding trust between the negotiating parties. I think this is extremely important. If we don't have trust, I think this will continue to be one of those protracted crises.
The successful candidate will take over from the Secretary-General, Ban Ki-moon, when he vacates the position at the end of the year. Ban Ki-moon has held the position since 2007. From Parliament, for Checkpoint, Benedict Collins.
It's 10:30 to 6. A former Taranaki teacher jailed for 4.5 years on child pornography charges today likened his offending to stamp collecting. Donald Matthew Capon had hundreds of thousands of child sex abuse images on his computer and had actively collected and distributed them for 15 years. Our Taranaki reporter Robin Martin was at the New Plymouth District Court for sentencing.
Donald Capon's offending was picked up by United States authorities who noticed his activity on a Canada-based website called Pedo in November 2015. Under the usernames Aura and Mac, the 50-year-old uploaded images and posted links to other material featuring child abuse, which were held in a cloud storage website in Slovakia. Customs searched his home in February and discovered 382,000 images and 17,000 videos depicting children on his computer. Judge Chris Sidegrove said in the defendant's pre-sentence report, Capon revealed he was excited by acquiring the images.
You admitted you used these images for sexual gratification and advised that the primary motivation for the offending was the thrill of the acquisition and likened your actions to collecting stamps or pens.
Judge Sidegrove said the report indicated Capon had a high risk of reoffending in a similar way, but was a low risk to the community.
You have no previous convictions, Mr. Capon. In all other respects, you are an upright member of the community. You conducted this behaviour in the privacy of your own home, and I gather from Ms. Hughes' submissions and your psychologist's report, it is highly unlikely that you will become a direct offender in the future.
The Crown Prosecutor, Cherie Clark, asked for a jail term of 5 years and 3 months and that a non-parole period of half the sentence be imposed. She said the volume of images, premeditated nature of the offending and the impact on the child victims were aggravating factors.
Fueling the demand for this type of material encourages sexual exploitation of children, and that's worldwide. The psychological impact of offending of this type has catastrophic, in essence, effects on children.
The Defence Counsel, Susan Hughes QC, said Capon's arrest had taken a huge weight off his shoulders.
Mr. Capon was isolated, lonely, and found himself effectively collecting such images in a manner which was compulsive. In short, he felt unable to control the urge he felt. Mr. Capon has felt a sense of relief in these crimes being revealed, as it has given him an opportunity to cease further collection and has given him an opportunity to address the issue he has.
Ms. Hughes said Capon was remorseful and had engaged in counselling at his own expense.
Mr. Capon is also acutely aware of the hardship his incarceration will cause his elderly parents, who are with him in court today. He feels nothing but shame, both for the crimes of which he's been committed and the damage to his family's name, and indeed the compromise to what will be the last years of his parents' life, because he is not here to help them.
Judge Sidegrove said in all other respects Capon was an upstanding member of society who had no previous convictions and committed the offences in the privacy of his own home. He settled on 4.5 years with no minimum parole period.
Mr. Capon, hopefully that will be the end of this type of offending by you. You can get proper counselling to assist you when you're released from prison. Hopefully your parents will be alive to see you and you can recover with them.
The manager of the Customs Investigation Unit, Maurice O'Brien, says he's happy with the sentence.
I think 4.5 years is a significant amount of time to be in imprisonment, and you have to bear in mind that with this type of child exploitation material, there's always a victim in this. These people don't do it voluntarily, so it's very successful for us.
On his release, Capon will have strict bail conditions relating to contact with minors, photography and his ability to connect to the internet. He'll also have to undertake child sex offending and substance abuse assessments and take part in any treatment recommended for him. In New Plymouth, for Checkpoint, ko Robin Martin Tēnei.
John Minto is to run for Mayor of Christchurch, commonly described as a veteran activist, as opposed to an activist on behalf of veterans, and one of the leading figures in the campaign against the 1981 Springbok Tour of New Zealand. Of course, Mr Minto has previously run for the Auckland Mayoralty and for the Mana Party. He's now part of the Keep Our Assets team. Given everyone's picking, he's got an almost impossible task taking on sitting Christchurch Mayor Leanne Dalzell. Why is he running in the election?
Well, I want to be Mayor of Christchurch because we've got some big, bold policies that will actually address the big issues facing the people of Christchurch. At the moment, we've got very much a corporate-oriented city council and a corporate-oriented rebuild, and we think that what we're aiming for is really a people-centred, a people-oriented city rather than what's being offered.
Do you have any realistic prospect at all of being elected, or are you simply trying to get onto the agenda things like asset sales?
Well, we do want to get these things onto the agenda because the people of Christchurch have never had a debate about asset sales. They were sprung on us after the votes were counted in the last election. So yeah, we do want those things discussed, but we're not here just to wave the flag and say, look, these issues are important. We're actually going out to win this election, and we think that we've got big, bold policies that will resonate with the people of Christchurch. Having said that, we accept that we are the underdogs.
How would you get along with the government? Because that's so important in Christchurch, isn't it? What the community wants, what the minister and the government want, and the mayor somewhere in the middle.
So the voice of the people of Christchurch has been lost, and it was lost as soon as the Share an Idea program was sidelined by the government. We've got to bring those things back to the fore, and it doesn't mean alienating government. It just means being absolutely plain with the government that these are the policies that the Christchurch people have voted for if they vote for me, and they are the policies that will be implemented, and we would expect the government to stand alongside the people of Christchurch in what they want and make sure this happens.
Right. If we look at some of the policies you've announced this morning, free public transport, 1,000 affordable council-owned rental homes or rent-to-buy homes, obviously this stuff costs money. You're opposed to asset sales. What are your options to pay for it? More debt? Rate increases?
Well, we certainly won't be increasing rates and we won't be selling assets. The policies we're putting forward, John, are policies that will save the city money. Free public transport will save us enormous amounts of money. We're also, introducing the living wage for everybody employed in Christchurch will save money, because what we are going to do is manage down the very high salaries that are paid to the senior managers who work within the council. We're saying the maximum salary that will be paid in Christchurch is $160,000, which is 4 times the living wage. It would mean the mayor, for example, myself, if I was elected mayor, I'd immediately have a $24,000 pay cut, because at the moment the mayor is paid $184,000, it would come down to $160,000. And we've got 200 people who are paid more than $100,000, and I think a dozen or so paid more than $200,000. Managing down those salaries will pay for increasing the wages of people who are doing the hard work on the streets to keep the city moving.
When I've said to people that I'm going to interview you about running for Mayor of Christchurch, everyone I've spoken to has said, the guy's an Aucklander. Isn't it a little bit cheeky to move down there only, a year ago and already be running for mayor?
Well, I don't see that as a problem at all. At this time, I always claim my South Island heritage, John. I grew up in Dunedin, and in a sense, it's me, coming back to the mainland. But I think what we're asking people to do is to look at the policies. We hope that there will be a policy debate. And in some ways, coming from the outside, and I've been here almost 2 years now, coming from the outside, it means that I bring some fresh eyes to look at what's happened here. And I think people will be prepared to give us a fair go. I know in some areas of Christchurch it's notoriously parochial. But I think the majority of people here living in Christchurch have come from other places, and I think they'll be prepared to give these ideas a go.
John Minto, just before 6, we're going to have a report from Reuters. This is the 23 people who've been killed and dozens hurt in a head-on collision involving 2 trains in southern Italy.
A grim scene after at least 20 died and dozens were injured when 2 passenger trains collided at a high speed in southern Italy. 3 carriages were torn apart by the violence of the impact after the 2 trains hit each other head-on as they traveled down the same stretch of track. It is still unclear just what happened. Prime Minister Matteo Renzi is expected to head to the region.
I want to express my condolences to the families, and I have ordered, with no holding back, to find out who is responsible for what happened. I think absolute clarity must be made on this. We will not stop until we understand what happened.
It's not clear how many people were on the trains at the time of the collision, as Italy confronts one of its worst transportation disasters, raising more questions than answers amid the grief.
Kia ora everyone, as the Pips just told us, it is 6 o'clock. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Thank you for being with us. In the next 30 minutes, the police say Hamilton man Nick Marshall was killed last night because he refused to put his weapon down. It's a version of events his family strongly disputes. Bad weather closes South Auckland roads. We'll tell you which ones and also where the wind is very bad if you are driving. A retired school administrator is sentenced to 2 years and 3 months jail for stealing $375,000 from Wellington High School. And the United States President Barack Obama has led tributes to 5 Dallas police officers killed in that sniper attack last week. All of that and more in the next 29 minutes. But first, RNZ News with Katrina Batten.
Ngā mihi nui, good evening. A Hamilton business owner says a police raid that ended in a fatal shooting all happened in a matter of minutes. The police shot dead 36-year-old Nick Marshall during an armed search of a Hamilton property for drugs and weapons early yesterday evening. They say he pointed a long-barrel gun at officers and did not put it down despite being told to several times. Daya Singh, who owns a business across the road, told Checkpoint he saw police cars pull up to the property with lights flashing and officers shouting out to the people inside.
They're still calling, and then all of a sudden we just heard them shooting, bang, 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 almost 4 times.
Daya Singh says he had spoken with the man a few times in the past and he seemed like a nice person. Some home buyers say they're finding it impossible to track down affordable houses in the Auckland developments that promise to offer them. Several projects in the city's special housing areas, such as Hobsonville Point, were supposed to reserve some homes for people on an average income. But buyers have told Checkpoint they can't find out how to contact developers or whether there's a waiting list or ballot system. One, Michaela, says she contacted the Auckland Central MP Nikki Kay, the Auckland Council and Housing New Zealand and was told to contact developers directly. She tried to reach 13, spoke to 3 and says only 1 was helpful.
There was only 2 other people. One guy said, contact the council, and the other guy didn't seem to know what I was talking about and just said that I seemed to know more than he did.
Michaela, who's been looking for an affordable home in Auckland. New disclosure requirements for foreign trusts are likely to be in place early next year. All of the recommendations of a government-commissioned review have been formally accepted, except a proposal to speed up the rollout of anti-money laundering laws. John Shewan made about 20 recommendations to strengthen what he said are inadequate rules surrounding foreign trusts. The Revenue Minister, Michael Woodhouse, says the government intends to move quickly and implement all but 1 recommendation.
Well, the registration and requirement for the provision of information every year is going to form part of a bill that I'll be introducing in August. That'll be referred to Select Committee, and I'm hoping to have it passed by about March or April next year. And then the disclosure regime will come in very quickly after that.
The Revenue Minister, Michael Woodhouse. The Ministry of Social Development is trialling a new safety measures in Wellington and Levin following the fatal shooting of 2 staff members in 2014. WorkSafe is prosecuting the ministry for breaching the health and safety of the 2 women who died at its Ashburton office, and a hearing at the Wellington District Court has been shown a 3D representation of the new measures. Its Health and Safety Manager, Melissa Gill, says the measures include having 2 guards at the entrance to all WINS offices, one of whom will speak to clients before they enter the building.
If a satisfactory answer is given, they tap on the window and the other guard operates the mechanism so that they will have a view into the front of house of the site. So they should be scanning both the environment inside the front of house as well as working with their colleague on the other side of the door.
Melissa Gill said a business case for the changes will be taken to Cabinet so they can be signed off and implemented nationwide. Strong winds have knocked several vehicles off the road in the lower South Island today, including a bus carrying 30 tourists. Met Service recorded gusts of 122 kilometres an hour in Fiordland and in Porters Pass in Canterbury, and 94 kilometres an hour in Fairlie. Near Fairlie, a tourist bus was pushed off the road by a strong gust, coming to a stop near the edge of a steep bank. Andrew Norris at the Fire Service's Southern Communications Centre says cars or motorbikes were blown off the road at several other locations in Canterbury, particularly around Mount Somers and Methven. No one was injured in any of the accidents. Motorists on State Highway 1 between Darfield and Methven and Timaru and Rolleston have been warned to take extra care due to strong winds this evening. The telecommunications company Chorus says internet usage in New Zealand is continuing to boom. It says home data usage doubled in 15 months to an average of 100 gigabytes per month. That equates to 30 hours of high-definition content online. The line's firm says usage is forecast to rise another 64% to 170 gigabytes per month in the next year. That will be 56 hours a month by this time next year. Chorus says Greater Auckland consumption is well above the national average, followed closely by Wellington, Palmerston North, Rotorua and Dunedin. More than half of all New Zealanders now watch internet TV. In sport, a 5-time Olympic champion says male golfers should tell the truth about pulling out of the Rio Olympics. World number 2, Jordan Spieth, is the latest to withdraw from next month's Games, citing fears over the Zika virus. However, a few athletes from other sports have pulled out due to Zika, and just one female golfer has withdrawn. The British rower Sir Steve Redgrave, who won gold medals at 5 separate Olympics, says male golfers are focused on the big money majors, and they should admit as much.
When it comes down to it, the majors are much more important, and unfortunately it's a money-orientated sport as well, so they don't earn any money for going to the Olympics. And I wish that they would all come out and say that's the real reason that they're not going, instead of using another excuse, because if you're an Olympic athlete, you've trained for 4 years to go to these games, you're not going to give it up.
Sir Steve Redgrave. The men's world tennis number 2, Andy Murray, has set his sights on overtaking Novak Djokovic at the top of the rankings after capturing his second Wimbledon crown. Murray, who reunited with coach Ivan Lendl last month, has reached the finals of his last 5 tournaments. And the American Jerry Olszewski will become Swimming New Zealand's new national coach from September. He'll take over from Clive Power, who's been the acting head coach for the past year. That's the news.
Racism in the US.
More than 50 years after the passage of the Civil Rights Act, we cannot simply turn away and dismiss those in peaceful protest.
Tragedy on the tracks.
There will be a full inquiry to find out who is responsible for this crash and what has happened.
Corbyn down, but not out.
The Labour Party National Executive has decided that an incumbent is automatically on the ballot paper, so I'm on the ballot paper.
A global view. Philippa Tolley and Guy Espin, a morning report, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, the Rotorua beneficiary who's battling winds to stop overpaying him. And after 10, who's ruining the internet? Web activist Cory Doctorow weighs in on the unscrupulous online activities of corporations and governments. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after morning report on RNZ National.
It's freezing in here, just like the Met Service weather to midnight tomorrow. And warnings cover the South Island and Lower North Island. Northland to Waitomo, including Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Rain developing this evening, briefly heavy in the morning, followed by isolated showers. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, high cloud with brief rain overnight or in the morning. Taranaki to Wellington, also Waiata Upper, rain with heavy falls and isolated thunderstorms late today, easing to showers tomorrow morning and clearing Wellington and Waiata Upper. Severe northerly gales later today, easing early tomorrow. Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury, Otago and Southland, heavy rain in the west and about Nelson today with scattered falls further east. Northwest gales severe in Marlborough and Canterbury today, mainly fine tomorrow, although further showers in the west and also Southland. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, heavy rain at times with squally thunderstorms and hail. Snow to 400 metres about Fiordland tomorrow morning. And the Chatham Islands cloudy, rain with heavy falls developing tomorrow afternoon. It's bang on 6:09.
Bang on.
Doesn't happen very often.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Thanks, Katrina. Appreciate it. Katrina's talking about the weather, of course. We are going to go and get the latest on the roads in about 4 minutes. The police say Hamilton man Nick Marshall was killed last night because the 36-year-old was armed and refused to put down his weapon. The police say when they went into a building, armed officers encountered the man with a long-barreled firearm. This version of events is strongly disputed by his family, by the way. Assistant Commissioner Alan Borum says a short standoff took place in a confined space in a building in semi-industrial Frankton.
They've encountered a man inside who has obtained a long-barreled weapon, and despite their calling for him to desist, he has continued to present a threat to them, and they've ended up having to fire on him.
Alan Boren says he's not aware if the man fired back, but he did point his weapon at police. Police are very emphatic about that. The family strongly disputes it. Mr. Marshall's father, Nelson Marshall, and his girlfriend have both taken to social media to say he was unarmed. But what's not in dispute is that the shooting happened as armed police officers raided the semi-industrial property in the suburb of Frankton. Police say it was part of an ongoing investigation into the supply of methamphetamine and firearms. Neighbouring Frankton businessman Daya Singh describes what happened when the police arrived.
They started shouting, calling that man to come out or something, and they're still calling, and then all of a sudden we just heard them shooting, bang, 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 almost 4 times.
Daya Singh, our reporter Alex Ashton has spent much of the day in Hamilton. I asked him what more he was able to tell us about Nick Marshall himself.
Hi John, not a lot at this stage. We know he was 36 years old and his father, Nelson Marshall, was quite a well-known Hamilton businessman. So his father also posted on Facebook this morning saying that his son wasn't armed at the time and disputing the police's series of events. We also heard that from the woman who said she was his girlfriend. So quite a strikingly different series of events from the two sides. Because they had posted, we did pop around to the family home. It's not something we like doing, obviously, John, and there were people gathered there, but they didn't want to make any further comment on that. But yeah, definitely two very, very different series of events here.
Yeah, Assistant Commissioner Alan Borum insistent that a firearm was presented. The family equally insistent that it wasn't. What's going on behind you, Alex? I just see lots of cars coming and going, armed police still there. They're obviously still searching the scene.
Yeah, the police are still searching the scene, and as you say, they're still here. They've been here all day and they're likely to stay here for a couple more days, they think, examining the scene. The thing is, there's still businesses operating behind me, so people are coming and going and being let in and out. Because for others, this is business as usual on the street. It's just what's happening in one of the buildings behind us. We're not exactly sure which one. Is obviously the scene examination, as I say.
Alex, any further elaboration on what the police thought was going on inside the building? Obviously, methamphetamine has been suggested. Any clarity around that?
No, not as such. All we know is, as you say, that they were there on a pre-planned search warrant, and they were looking for methamphetamine specifically, possible gang connections and supply of firearms. So they went in there about 6:30 last night. Haven't made any arrests following on from that. But no, in terms of what exactly they were doing in there, we don't know quite exactly what was the case here.
Alex Ashton from the scene. It's 13 minutes 6:30. One of the most frequent visitors into the Checkpoint email inbox is the really good people at the Christchurch Transport Operations Centre, updating us on travel information in Christchurch and throughout the South Island. And tonight was just an unusually busy dispatch with lots and lots of information, so we thought we'd actually go to them tonight. So we're bringing in Luke Thomas on the phone. Luke, welcome to Checkpoint. It's nice to have you here in person rather than in email form. So there's a heavy rain warning, there's some heavy snowfalls, but I think it's the winds that will be most worrying for people on the roads by the look of things. Can you start with the closures? What roads have you closed?
Yeah, thanks, John. Well, at the moment, only the one road's closed, and that's Milford Road, which runs between Tiana and Milford Sound. And that closed at 6 o'clock due to the heavy snow forecast tonight.
Okay, but lots of strong winds warnings, and some of these are on State Highway 1, so some of these are on busy roads. And of course, we saw a bus full of tourists be lifted off the road earlier, so the winds are really strong. What are the areas that, if you're in a high-sided vehicle or on a motorbike, you really need to take care?
Yeah, that's right. So on State Highway 1, particularly between Rolleston and Timaru, and again between Blenheim and Kaikoura, it's quite strong through there. Also, State Highway 8, that's a common spot for these winds between Twizel and Fairley.
Right, that's a long stretch of road. So Rolleston to Timaru, that's the best part. What? That's approaching a 2-hour drive, isn't it? And Kaikoura to Blenheim. So all up the east coast, as far south as Timaru, that's just really windy, is it?
Yeah, that's right. It's pretty common when we get these northerly winds. You probably know about the northwester through Canterbury. And these northerlies, we get a heck of a lot of rain on the west coast, which caused a few issues today, but the roads stayed predominantly fine on the west coast. And then we get that wind coming over the Alps, and it just roars through the Canterbury Plains and cause a few issues on the roads.
Yeah, and in the shadow of the Alps, I see around Fairley, Geraldine, and all around there, you've got some ice warnings too.
That's right. Yeah, it's been quite icy through there with the calm weather we had building up to this front that's moving through now. And tonight, the Met Service has also issued some road snowfall warnings for the Alpine passes, so anywhere between 2 and 10 centimetres of snow. So make sure you carry chains, and if you're going over the Alps tomorrow, check the NZTA website before you leave, just in case some of those roads have either closed or have restrictions on them.
Luke Thomas, thank you for all the good work you guys do, updating us on the conditions, and we appreciate you joining us this evening. In short, if you are driving in the South Island this evening or tonight or overnight, do be careful. A retired school administrator has been sentenced to 2 years and 3 months jail for stealing $375,000 from a Wellington high school. 68-year-old David John Hancock's created and submitted dozens of invoices while overseeing building work at Upper Hutt College between 2007 and 2014. Emile Donovan was at the Hutt Valley District Court.
Upper Hutt College principal Judith Taylor said she was shocked and disgusted that the man responsible was her colleague. In a victim impact statement read on her behalf, she wrote about the 3,000 children who passed through the school between 2007 and 2014 who were affected by his stealing. She said the school had missed out on employing teacher aides and buying equipment and other resources because of a lack of funding. As its executive officer, Hancock's oversaw the financial management of 2 major building developments. Judge Barbara Morris said Hancock's crimes were serious and abused the considerable power he held at the school.
Over the course of the previous 7.5 years, you had created 77 false invoices and paid yourself into your personal account $375,000 of the school's funds, of the students' funds.
The Crown Prosecutor Gregor Allen called Hancock's fraud relentless and said his crimes had caused widespread damage.
The school itself is now under statutory management, but as Ms Taylor said, the fraud committed by Don Hancock stole a lot more than money from the school. It took resources and an extraordinary amount of time from a range of affected persons.
Hancock's lawyer, Steve Taylor, said this was Hancock's first offence and argued he was under severe stress while the building works were ongoing.
He was given huge additional responsibilities to manage the building project. This effectively became an additional full-time job. That led to a situation where he was working under considerable stress, trying to complete and manage both the functions.
Judge Morris took time off Hancock's sentence for remorse and his early guilty plea, which she said showed the defendant was taking responsibility for his actions. In a brief statement, Hancock's apologised to his family and former colleagues. He said he couldn't pay the money back in one lump sum, but would pay $50 reparations every fortnight from his superannuation fund. For Checkpoint, Emile Donovan.
Financial advice from robots and tougher rules for the humans are part of an overhaul of the financial advice sector, really. The changes to 8-year-old laws mean advisors will have to be qualified, licensed and disclose more information about their commissions. Our reporter Michael Kropp has more on this.
The changes are about ensuring consumers have better information about the person giving them advice on how to look after their money. The Minister of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, Paul Goldsmith, says the new rules will also enable people to get so-called robo-advice online.
Not everybody wants to sit down and have a half-hour conversation with a financial advisor. Particularly some people of the younger generation want to be able to go onto an app and put their details in and get some advice about what's best for them in terms of KiwiSaver or their personal savings.
He says the computer algorithms behind the robo-advice will be monitored by the Financial Markets Authority. Advisors will have a legal obligation to put the interests of clients first and reveal any conflicts. A Consumer New Zealand researcher, Jessica Wilson, wants to see a publicly accessible register which lists the commissions advisors get when they make a sale.
Knowing the incentives that they may be subject to is really important. You should now, as a consumer, be able to, once the changes are in place, find out what an advisor may be being paid, whether they are being paid to sell you a particular type of product. And if you don't like what you're hearing, go elsewhere.
Ms Wilson would also like to see changes that ensure consumers can see details of successful complaints against an advisor. But Susan Taylor from a dispute resolution service, Financial Services Complaints Limited, disagrees. She says that sort of transparency could discourage people from cooperating with an investigation.
By not naming and shaming, we are often able to negotiate settlements that are favourable to consumers for the very reason that the advisor would rather settle the complaint through our process, knowing that it's a confidential process.
Ms Taylor says she supports the idea of allowing robo-advice, but it needs clearer consumer protections. The government hopes to write a draft version of the legislation this year. For Checkpoint, Michael Kropp there.
Kia ora, Michael. We were looking earlier in Checkpoint at the special housing areas and getting into the affordable homes in them. They've been really built and people really want to get access to them, but we're increasingly hearing they're not. And it's very, very difficult to find your way in. We've just received this email. We're not going to give the name of the person who sent it, but it says, "Hi John, as a council officer who has some involvement with the special housing areas, the whole SHA plan has effectively licensed big development companies to build thousands of houses under looser planning restrictions on land council or government has given them. Less than 20% of any of the new units need to be affordable. The affordability criteria are generally set down as conditions of resource consent, and this will require council compliance inspectors who generally monitor over 509 active resource consents to be aware of when the houses go for sale and to whom they are being sold to ensure compliance. Simply not going to happen. Guaranteed." This is a fascinating issue and we're going to keep looking at it, and thank you for that feedback. Who will be the next Secretary General of the United Nations? Those competing for the position today participated in the first ever televised debate between candidates for the UN's top job, among them former New Zealand Prime Minister Helen Clark. Our reporter Mimi Chiamin is in New York, and I asked her about the debate, beginning with the fact that there's never been one like it before.
No, there hasn't. This is considered very historic. The selection of the Secretary General has traditionally been almost somewhat covert in the sense that the public doesn't really get to get a sense of what goes into selecting the Secretary General. So this really is almost gives them a chance to be at a pageant and say what their leadership style is going to be, what issues are important to them, and just very much a very transparent, for the very first time process.
Did it feel like a pageant? Did it feel a bit like that?
I have to say it did. I have to say, watching and listening in, there was this sense of almost one-upping one another, which I suppose is part and parcel of a process where you are, in a sense, competing with your fellow candidates, and everyone had to they were posed at some points the same question: what will your leadership style be? As a Secretary General, do you think you'll be more of a secretary or a general? Those kinds of questions were posed. But overall, I think that all of the candidates had a very good opportunity to say what they thought they could bring to the table as Secretary General.
Right, can we speak first of all about our New Zealand candidate, former Prime Minister Helen Clark? How did she go, do you think, Mimi?
I think that she performed well. She has in the past criticized how the United Nations has dealt with peace and security issues around the world. And so I think that this gave her a chance to make a statement about what she would do differently, how the UN would go about things like that if she had the role of Secretary General. She said that she thinks that the long-term answers lie in building peaceful and inclusive societies where people talk about their differences rather than fight them out. And she also got a huge round of applause when she made a comment about immigrants and immigration and refugees and how New Zealand has historically had many refugees come into their country, and she said that they have paid their country back substantially and many times over, and that people don't leave their countries for no reason, and that really got her a big round of applause from the audience.
So that was well received.
It was.
Who else got that kind of response? Was there anyone that you thought stood out as having done really well?
I would have to say that the most recent one named to be thrown into the hat, Irina Bokova, she certainly got the audience's attention, I have to say, as especially in the discussion of whether it is time for someone in Eastern Europe.
Yeah.
Yes, because it is usually rotated between the
two. So, and she offers, if we're going to be completely shallow about this, and I'm going to apologise to our listeners in advance, she offers the double whammy because there's never been a female in the role and there's never been an Eastern European in the role, and she's both, right?
Precisely. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah, not that we're being shallow about this, Mimi. And of course, all of this pageantry, all of this lovely rhetoric and all of this newness doesn't alter the fact that the Security Council still decides.
Exactly. That's right. It doesn't alter that at all. But I think that it perhaps will, as Helen Clark said, build a better culture of trust between the public who, as the UN came up on its big 70th anniversary last year, many people were saying, what is the UN even there for now?
Mimi Chowman, who's in New York, just absolutely fascinating, this contest. But at the end of it all, obviously, as Mimi was saying, the UN Security Council decides as they always have done. It's 6:26. The US President Barack Obama, staying in the US, has led tributes to 5 Dallas police officers who were killed during a sniper attack last week. He told a memorial service that the United States must reject despair at a time of heightened racial tensions across the country. Our Washington correspondent Harry Horton filed this report.
The United States is still in shock after a series of high-profile deaths last week. 2 more African-American men killed by law enforcement, and at a protest over their deaths, 5 Dallas police officers gunned down by a sniper. President Obama landed in Dallas after spending hours trying to find the words not only to console the police officers' families, but also to reassure a country fearful that racial divisions are worsening. The overwhelming tone of the president's speech was of optimism and hope.
Dallas, I'm here to say we must reject such despair. I'm here to insist that we are not as divided as we seem. And I know that because I know America. I know how far we've come against impossible odds.
Also at the ceremony in his home state of Texas, former President George W. Bush, who praised the courage of the slain police officers.
At times it seems like the forces pulling us apart are stronger than the forces binding us together. Argument turns too easily into animosity. Disagreement escalates too quickly into dehumanization. Too often we judge other groups by their worst examples, while judging ourselves by our best intentions.
The service closed with both presidents, first ladies, Texas officials and more all linking arms in song. Barack Obama balanced praise for the work of the police forces with an acknowledgement of a racial bias that still exists. His words aim to heal a nation, but after Air Force One returns to Washington and the TV cameras move on, much work is required to sew the wounds of this latest tragedy. For Checkpoint, I'm Harry Horton in Washington.
Terry, bringing our program to an end for tonight. We are going to look tomorrow at special housing areas. Now, these, on the face of it, they've been very successful if you look at Hobsonville Point. So that's out west on former Air Force land. It's mixed housing. Some people pay the top market rate. Some of the properties are pretty expensive. But it includes a component, somewhere in the region of 10% plus, of what's called affordable housing at Hobsonville Point. That's in a range of $450,000 to $550,000, if you can get it. And that's the point. Can you get it? We'd love to hear from you if you've tried to get it there or at any of the special housing areas, because we're increasingly hearing that it's almost impossible to get, and it's giving developers a license to get access to land that they wouldn't otherwise have gotten access to, and to get all sorts of consents that they wouldn't otherwise have received. So we're going to look at that tomorrow. In the meantime, people are complaining about the fact that I've made it too cold in here and Katrina Batten is shivering. People are siding with Katrina, but that's fine because I have the evidence. It's 17.5 degrees according to the temperature in here. Now, admittedly, that's not tropical, but Katrina and I are both from Wellington, and frankly, 17.5 is balmy. Harden up, woman. 17.5 degrees. I'm going for a swim. Good evening, everyone. We'll be back tomorrow. Thank you so much for being with us.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. A Hamilton business owner says a police raid that ended in a fatal shooting unfolded within a matter of minutes. Some home buyers say they can't track down affordable houses in the Auckland developments that promised to offer them. A former Taranaki teacher jailed today on child pornography charges likened his offending to stamp collecting. And the lines company Chorus says home internet data usage has doubled in 15 months to an average of 100 gigabytes a month. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Every weekday lunchtime, RNZ National presents in-depth coverage of international news and issues.
I will always do what is correct, whether the individual concerned is an ordinary citizen or a sitting president.
Not just the headlines, but full reporting of the most important overseas stories of the day from correspondents on the ground as world news breaks.
Prime Minister Hyder al-Abadi promised victory.